Welcome to another episode of the Impossible Life Podcast. I'm your co-host, Nick Surface, and I'm looking across at a man who was recently found to be trilingual. That's right, friends. The former Navy SEAL, Garrett Unkelbach, a man who speaks English, aggression, and corn dog.
I am not the linguist on this call.
No, which is interesting to me because I always thought you'd be really good at languages.
Man, a lot of things have come easy to me or not been super hard for me. I've fought hard in languages and for Arabic in the military. I just memorized the commands, and then also people that we were working with made me angry, and gave me some passion to learn a little bit more of the language so I could speak to them or yell at them. But no, I mean, language is always hard for me. I did 4 years. I'm typical, American student. Did 4 years of Spanish in high school. Can't speak Spanish.
Really? I didn't know that. Huh. Well, there you go. Well, anyways, this is not the Can You Speak Spanish episode. This is actually this is an unpopular opinions series.
Is this our second or third?
This is the second one. I didn't call it unpopular opinions officially in the last title, but I think this one may actually be titled.
It's hot. Yeah, it's hot takes for sure.
Yeah, but like the whole point of these, I got some texts from friends of the show, and they were like, "Man, that episode ticked me off." When we said about,
what was the last hot take we did?
You shouldn't be vulnerable with your wife. You should be transparent.
Oh yeah,
and that was
of course it made them mad.
Yeah. And so like we're laughing about it. The point of these, if it makes you mad, then that's okay, because it's the whole point is to challenge your thinking on things. And so today's unpopular opinion,
and these are not just the things of like, oh, Garrett wants to make people mad. This is I'm not putting it back on Nick, because I stand behind all of my opinions. But these are opinions that Nick knows that I have, that he's like, man, you should share that with people.
Yeah, the opinion we're sharing today, we actually both feel strongly about, and I lived this out, for years, over a decade before I even met Garrett. But this is the opinion, the division, that there should be a clear division of labor in the home. And a lot of people will have a problem with that because to them, equality means you do exactly 50-50, right? So
yeah, so let's ease our way into this one, and I'm sure we'll dig the hole a little bit deeper. But one of the first things I say to people on this point of why I think this is so great to run your household this way is that when there's a division of labor, there's no what I call scorekeeping in a marriage.
Yeah.
Scorekeeping, if there is pure division of labor where it's like, hey, I take out the trash on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday, and you take out the trash on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, then if I have to take out the trash on Tuesday, for whatever reason, then I'm going to say, well, I took it out on Tuesday, so you got to take, my day on this day. And that's what scorekeeping looks like. And people do this in their marriages all the time. Yeah. And the last thing you want to have in your marriage is a dynamic of, well, I did this, so you got to do this.
Yeah. I mean, just ask yourself if you would want to be around a person who's constantly reminding you what they did for you and telling you that, hey, you owe me one. Like no one enjoys that. And yet people live their marriage and their household that way.
And let's before we dive into it a little bit further, let's define how you and I, run our households. And for me and Nick is very much the same. Lindsay is a full-time mom, which is more than a full-time job. Yeah. And before we had children, Lindsay had a job. Once we had children, we both felt like the best decision was for her to be home. And now having 3 kids, it is, it's all of the effort that she has. Nick knows what that's like. He's been where I'm at right now. So there's a lot of things that I do. I make all of the money, even though it's our money. I work outside the home. Lindsay takes care of a lot of things for me, right? Mm-hmm. She takes care of the children. She takes care of running our household, which is she does the dishes, she does laundry. She's responsible for so much stuff. And I don't help with those things.
Right.
My wife doesn't say, well, why don't you help me with the laundry a little bit? She doesn't say, well, why don't you help me with the dishes? The way Lindsay's very capable and very responsible. She's happy if I do help her, but she never asked me to.
Right.
And there's a lot of people who would be like, man, what a deadbeat Garrett is. He doesn't help you with dishes. He doesn't do any of his own laundry.
Right. But and I'm in the same boat. I mean, we've been doing it for 13 years with Rian being home, looking after the kids, and me bringing in all the money. And I will tell you, it was not always because it was so convenient and I was just doing so well in business.
Yeah.
I always point out to people, like, we made a very clear distinction of what we wanted and why we wanted it, and the division of labor was more of a logical thing, as far as what we have the time and availability, and how we can best serve each other. So I'm in the same boat. I mean, I make all the money for us, and I never refer to it as my money. Just I want to make sure I'm clear about that, because it's our money that we're building, because we're building a kingdom family. I take
Yeah.
care of all.
Dave Ramsey says marriage is not a joint venture; it's a covenant. So
Right.
whether two people make the money or one person makes the money, it's our money,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's our house, and
Right.
it's our kids.
Exactly right. And there's things. So, like, I never go to the grocery store, which I'm very grateful for. I don't do my laundry. I will help here and there around the kitchen if I can see Rand's overwhelmed, but by and large, I don't really do that either. But I take care of all our investments. Like, there's things that if I ever, for example, with trash cans and stuff like that, I'm adamant. I've told my wife, I'm like, there's been a few times whenever I'd be on a call and I'd forgotten to put them out, and the trash truck's coming, so she puts them out. I always apologize to her. She doesn't care, but to me, like, I'm like, no, I don't want you to feel like you have to do stuff like that. Now, you might think that that sounds weird, if you're sat at home listening to this, but, like, I don't look at any of that stuff. It's all a way for me to serve my wife, and the same for her. Like, she actually doesn't like me making my own food, because she knows how much of a blessing it is to me. Like, she comes in and asks me, hey, do you want me to make anything? Or she'll shoot me a text, hey, can I make you a sandwich, or do you want me to bring you some lunch? And if I say, hey, I was gonna go make myself a sandwich, she'll be like, hey, go sit down, I'll do it. Now, and the reason she does that is because she knows I love that. I love when she looks after me. It's not because I can't. It's not because I've insisted upon it, or I've been like, well, I guess I'm going to starve today, woman. Nothing like that. It's 100% like she loves me and I love her. So it's like, I think it's people that trip over this stuff. They've put like a score system of what's good and what's bad and demeaning in place, which is odd.
So Nick, this is normally your job, but I'll
Yes.
do it.
Okay.
Um,
That's
and asking the audience question, a lot of people would say, well, like, hey, that's what you guys prefer, but that's not, that maybe that's what your wife likes, maybe that's what Garrett likes, what Nick likes, but that's not, a man or a woman maybe saying, well, that's not what I like. Those aren't my preferences.
right.
And so that you could say these things are preferences, but I would like to talk about some of the things in this that we think are principles.
Correct. And you know what I think the principle is here, G? And we just coming off of our 6 principles everyone's navigating. I think it's honor. And I think what people are unaware of is Rena and I have a really clear vision for our family. Like, underneath all this, what we want to say, one of the prerequisites you have to have is a vision for your family. Because if you just come in and you're like, hey, I heard the Impossible Life podcast, and guess what? You're going to start doing all the food, and I'm going to do it. It's like, no, 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 don't do that. Because that's not how it works, and that's not how it happened. For us, it's like we have a very clear picture of why our family's here. And hint, it's not to build the surface empire, it's to advance the kingdom of God. And as such, we understand that we need to demonstrate and model this life for our kids. Because as I was talking to your mentor today, who we both love, Phil, and he said kids are great, are always watching, and sometimes they listen. And I thought that it's just a very well said thing. To me, I look at all the ways that my wife and I treat each other, and what my kids are learning is how they're supposed to treat each other, and how their other people are supposed to treat them. So if I'm constantly bickering at my wife, like, well, you said you're supposed to do this, I'm not going to do that. I can't believe I just did this for you. You're not going to do this for me. What are our kids learning? Like, I tell my kids off for that. If they come across a mess and they're like, I didn't make it, my first thing I say back to them is, I was like, you live here, so you should want to make it better. If I then go treat their mom that way, I'm completely undermining that.
You said honor. I'll
Yeah.
talk. Let me talk about how I think that this is a matter of excellence. Because
Okay.
what my personal definition of excellence is to do something in its greatest form.
Right.
Let me give a great example of that. Um, there's a few things that God has not given me as a man that my wife has. I'm
Right.
not just making a joke, but at the same time, there's hormones and all kinds of things that a mother has that a man does not have.
Right.
I cannot make my children feel the way that Lindsay makes them feel, especially with Faith, our new little girl. That I do not put out the oxytocin and all the other hormones that Lindsay does when I hold her.
Mm-hmm.
And so, who is the most excellent person in that role? Lindsay is, without a
Oh, yeah.
doubt. And if I tried to fill that role, I could not do it as good as she can. And that is a example. That's an easy example because most people are not foolish enough to try to argue with that one. That makes the case that there are things that Lindsay is better at than me, and there are things that I'm better at than Lindsay.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's understanding that we both have roles and parts to play. And I can tell you, growing up in a house where my mom's really smart. My mom's super capable. I grew up in a home where my dad full-time worked and my mom full-time was a mom. Mm-hmm. And we've talked a lot on this show about how identity and where me personally, where I've gotten an identity from. And my dad set a great example for me, showed me a lot of who I was. But a part of your identity, we've only mentioned this a couple times, but a part of your identity is your self-esteem and your self-worth. Right. Where my dad, and this isn't just our thoughts, there's a lot of behavioral research that supports this. Mm-hmm. A lot of that self-esteem comes from your mom. You will have men who grew up with just a mother that might feel good about themselves, but they don't know who they are. Right. Because a lot of like the who you are will show up from your dad, but how you feel about yourself, what you believe about yourself, a lot of that will come from your mom. Mm-hmm. And my mom loved me so well. And the personal security that I have that comes in my identity is I love that the SEAL teams told us on day one, you're not special. But for my entire life, my mom made me believe that I was. Right. My mom loved me like I was special, treated me like I was special. And that's not like that I'm better than anybody else, but she had a very instrumental part in Garrett understanding that God has a plan for his life. Right. Right. Not that I'm some special person, but that God had a plan and that I believed that there was a unique plan that God has for my life, that I felt very loved and supported regardless of mistakes that I had made. And if my mom had worked, I would not have that level of security and I would not have the identity that I have today.
Yeah, no, and it's well said. And I mean, I grew up in a similar way. Like my parents sacrificed a lot so that my mom could be home with us. And, I wouldn't say I was a very aware teenager, but one of the things I knew whenever I was like, I never thought about, hey, I want this kind of wedding or I'm going to live in this place or whatever. But one of the things I knew is I was like, I want my wife to stay home with our kids because it was really obvious to me that no one would ever care about how your kids turn out as much as you do. Like that seems like a really obvious statement. And I don't know that anybody would argue with you about, could you argue that the person that at daycare really has a vested interest in how your kid turns out 18 years from now or whatever?
Absolutely.
Time frame? No way.
Absolutely not. And some people, I want to address this other argument. Nick, some people might look at you and people who know us closely know where we make money because it's not from the podcast yet. Where we do have a sponsor, Nick and I are not running our lives based upon income from this podcast. Correct. Nick and I both have plenty of other professional work. Some people might look at us and say, well, that's nice for you guys, because you make a lot of money, but no, other people can't do that.
Right.
Right. But like bring their wife home. A lot of people would say that, but I can say for me personally, when we decided for Lindsay to not work, she was 40% of our income. Yeah. And I was not making that much money. And it was a big cut for us. And I said, you know what? I'm going to figure it out. Yeah. Like, cause this is the most important thing. And the reason that if Lindsay was still working today, she'd be killing it. Lindsay is brilliant at a lot of things. So great in marketing, so great in front of her camera, helping people, products with telling their story. It's what she'd be doing today. But she knew just as well as I did and feels the same way that the most important thing that we can do is raise great children. Yeah. And one of us had to do that, and she's the person that's supposed to do it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I when Rian left her job, we were in the UK, and I think I was making $36,000 in American money. It was not a lot even in UK money, and it was even less in American money. And she left her job, and when we came out to America, I didn't even have a job. So I had a wife and a kid, no job. And when we were out on our own, it was in San Diego. I was making $68,000 a year to supporting a family of 4 in San Diego, which is one of the most expensive places to live. And it's as simple as what you said. You decided, and I decided as well, because to me, it was really important to me how my kids.
That's exactly what it is. You valued.
Yeah, I just and this is what's so I think people miss this. Your dad is so good at speaking this. I want to have him on the podcast just to do his decide message because people make decisions complicated. And what I've witnessed in you guys and what I've now become a part of is that the power of being able to make a decision and just being like, well, whatever the cost, I'll figure it out, but I've decided this, dude, that puts you in a whole different class of people. And I think it's unfortunate that we don't see more of that because the nucleus like of the family is God's first design. It's Genesis 1:28 of be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion. Multiplying didn't just mean that you go make a bunch of kids and like leave them to themselves. You were there to reproduce literally in these people kingdom way of thinking, to be the same way that God fathered Adam and was raising them up and raises us up, is that we would do that in our own home. And so to like offload that or outsource it is just crazy to me. And especially on the back of like society telling you, well, being at home as a stay-at-home mom, you're more than that. I'm like, what's more than raising another like
I,
multiple other people's lives?
I can say this without it sounding boastful. I know that me and my sister are my mom's greatest achievements.
Right.
She like that's what she is the most proud of,
Yeah.
is who we are, not some things that she's achieved in her career. And I hope that one day I get the opportunity to feel the exact same way about my children.
Yeah.
And just to dig in a little bit deeper on, and my dad feels the same way, by the way, not just my mom.
Right.
And just to dig in a little bit deeper on this hot take, and my goal is never, I'm not just trying to offend people, but I'm also 0% afraid of telling people the truth. And
Right.
I think this is something that more people need to hear, and they
Yeah.
need to hear it in a way that maybe hurts and offends a little bit, so that hopefully they'll do some reconciliation and make some changes.
Yeah.
Because this is uncomfortable to you, because I believe that many people have taken on some lies as truth.
Yep.
And so here's a little bit harsher truth of this division of labor point. The division of labor, it is, I'm saying, hey, it's good for your marriage. I also think it's great for your kids. And this is the hurtful part. Here's why I think a lot of people make this decision. You don't see it this way. Here's the way that I see it. Here's my perspective on it. I think a lot of people choose money over their children. They choose two incomes over one income, because how is two incomes not better than one income? Well, two incomes is way worse than one income when it costs you the best that you could give your children.
Yeah.
And what I know from my parents is the best thing that they could give me wasn't more money. The best thing that my parents could give me was more of their time and the best of themselves. And the majority of that was with my mom until I got a little bit older.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more, man. I mean, I think it's interesting, like I said, that society has painted this narrative. I actually looked it up before this because I was wondering when it changed. And you were talking about how in the industrialization era was the first time.
There's two major shifts, right?
Yeah.
And you got to do some sociological history, but the industrialization era got men out. This is 1800s. Got men working outside of the home, so less parental influence.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back further than that, families worked together on their land. That was the
Yeah.
majority of what people did: work their crops and their animals. That's the industrialization era change. And then in the 50s and 60s, there's feminism movement. You have post World War II, a lack of men, and you also have the beginning of consumerism and mass commercialization
Mm-hmm.
that sought to get women outside the home, which
Right.
we've overconsumed. Now we need more money. Now both parents have to work.
Yeah. And I mean, that feminism movement in the 60s started like this. You're a mom and you're a stay at home, and apparently you have it all, but you don't feel fulfilled. Well, clearly you're capable of more, and that's why. So what could you be doing? Well, you can do what other people are doing that's valuable. In this case, the men. And so it was like, well, now you're good enough to do that, as if it was a matter of being good enough or not. And that was the whole lie, was that your value is based off of like a societal chart that you allow to define. It's false identity. It's what we've covered before on the identity series: what you achieve, what you possess, or what people say about you. Those are worldly wisdom that leads you to the end of yourself and a very unfulfilled life. Because I can't say that movement has done great. If you study any socioeconomic class, or if you look at some of the history of race in our country, and you look at some of the statistics out there, the breakdown of the family home is so consistent in people. I mean, we've covered it before on this. If you like, for higher crime rates, for pregnancy, for teenage pregnancy, for prison, what is it? I think it's like 91% of people that end up in prison didn't have their father in their home. Like
Hmm.
you can't sit there and tell me that having the family together and having, people to raise you up doesn't make a difference. I mean, that it's just I can't even understand how it's an argument.
I there's a term that Lindsay uses with how the children treat her,
Hmm.
um, and a lot you could see this as a negative, but I want to paint some perspective with this. She calls herself the default parent.
Right.
And default can be a negative word a lot of the times, at least in the way we talk about it here in the podcast. But I don't think it's a negative term here in the way that I'm using it. She calls herself the default parent because, she's with the children all the time, and that they kind of treat me differently and sometimes better than they treat Lindsay because she's around all the time.
Yeah.
And that's a different dynamic that I'm not trying to get into. But what the point that I am making is that she is always with them.
Yeah.
Okay. And that means she's primarily responsible for them. And that afford not just for them, for their own sense of security, but it provides a great amount of protection for them. If
Hmm.
you look at it this way, Lindsay is always covering and protecting the children, and I'm covering and protecting her. And as much as I can, I want to spend time with the children as well. So at a minimum, they have 100% coverage. Sometimes they get 200% coverage.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a great, from a security and threat perspective, that is a great dynamic, right? We always have at least one full-time person over this important asset, which is our children. Relating this to like physical security and battlefield security in the military, that's a great dynamic. You have not playing zone defense, but playing man to man, right?
Hmm.
You have, if I have a VIP, I will put one person on that VIP, and it's like all your job is to do is to be right next to him. Now I will have a secondary layer of people that are, scanning threats and protecting and doing some zone defense, but I will have one person that is a primary on the VIP. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's a dangerous situation. You have two guys, you have a VIP and you have two guys, and they're both kind of bouncing back and forth between one-on-one support and zone support,
Hmm.
just kind of playing pickup basketball. Well,
Right.
if you're not covering, I'll cover him. And that sounds good, but it creates vulnerability. It
Yeah.
creates exposure that there are moments in time where neither of us are solely dedicated to the person.
Right.
And that's exactly the type of exposure and vulnerability you create in your children. When what you do with your children is, well, sometimes I'm the parent, sometimes you're the parent. I
Right.
do not think it is the design structure, and I've not heard a good argument for honestly how it is the best situation for your children that
Yeah.
we would co-parent and co-role in these things. And that's hard for a lot of people to hear because it completely upends the way that they've designed their lifestyle, and I don't see principles that support it.
No, I agree with you. So, G, let's wrap up. Let me ask you this because I know you like prompts for Garrett's brain. Let's say you're a listener out there and you're already married with kids and you're both working outside the home. You've got yourself in financial position where it's like you couldn't stop tomorrow because you wouldn't have enough money to pay the bills. What would you hope somebody like that would do? Like, how would you hope that they would process this episode?
Um, I would, well, one, you and your wife need to talk about it and decide that this is what you want, right? And that, what, this is what's best for our children. And then just like Nick talked about, it's my dad's message of decide. It's Daniel, I think chapter 6, verse 2, where I love this verse. He says, Daniel resolved. This was
Mm-hmm.
his response to the king creating turmoil. This was Daniel's response to the king, putting Daniel in a precarious situation. It just says that Daniel resolved, meaning he decided what he was going to do, uncertain of the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it takes to make things right in your life. Lindsay and I have talked about before, because I make a lot more money than I did years ago, and that's afforded some privileges for us. But Lindsay and I both said, if anything ever happened to my income, we would cut everything we had to cut. I would basically have to, get hit by a truck and be handicapped and unable to make money before Lindsay's going to re-enter the workforce. We would
Mm-hmm.
do everything we could, including sell our home and downsize before we put Lindsay back in the workforce.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. So that a lot of times people want like a nice 3-step process, but like the process is talk, get a vision, decide. That simple.
You made a decision out of comfortability, like more money would be nice. You're if you just if what you seek is, well, how do we keep what we have and then get to this? That's not the way to do it. It's the same way that I did it, the same way that Nick did it. It hurt when I made the decision. It cut our income by 40%. And I said, you know what? Let's just get to the right place and then we'll build a great thing from here.